Think about the cohort of customers who were required to register for the product before entering a study session with other students. They had very little information about the product, nothing more than was presented on Groket's homepage and registration page. By contrast, the lazy registration group had a tremendous amount of information about the product because they had used it. Yet, despite this information, disparate customer behavior was exactly the same. This suggested that improving Crockett's positioning and marketing might have a more significant impact on attracting new customer than would adding new features. This was just the first of many important experiments Rocket was able to run. Since those early days, they have expanded their customer base dramatically. They now offer test prep for numerous standardized tests, including the GMAT, SAT, ACT, and GRE, as well as online math and English courses for students in grades 7 through 12. Grokets continues to evolve its process, seeking continuous improvement at every turn. With more than 20 employees in its San Francisco office. Groket continues to operate with the same deliberate discipline approach that has been their hallmark along. They have helped close to 1 million students and are sure to help millions more. The value of their the value of the three A's. These examples from Crooked demonstrate each of the three A's of the matrix: actionable, accessible, and auditable. Actionable. For a report to be considered actionable, it must demonstrate clear cause and effect. Otherwise, it is vanity metrics. The report that Groket's teams begins to use to judge their learning milestones made it extremely clear that action would be necessary to replicate the result. By contrast, vanity metrics fails this criterion. Take the number of hits to a company website. Let's say we have 40,000 hits this month, a new record. What do we need to do to get more hits? Well, that depend where are the new hits coming from. Is it from 40,000 new customer or from one guy with an extremely active web browser? Are the hits the result of a new marketing campaign or PR push? What is a hit anyway? Does each page in the browser count as one hit, or do all the embedded images and multimedia content as well? Those who have said in the meeting debating the units of measurement in a report will recognize this problem. Vanity metrics wreak havoc because they prey on a weakness of the human mind. In my experience, when the number go up, people think the improvement was caused by their action, by whatever they were working on at the time. That is why it's so common to have a meeting in which marketing thinks the number went up because of a new PR marketing efforts, and engineers think the better numbers are the result of the new features it added. Finding out what is actually going on is extremely costly, and so most managers simply move on doing the best they can to form their own judgment on the basis of their experience and the collective intelligence in the room. Unfortunately, when the numbers go down, it results in a very different reaction. Now it's somebody else's fault. Thus, most team members or department live in a world where their department is constantly making things better only to have their hard work sabotaged by other departments that just don't get it. Is it any wonder these departments develop their own distinct language, jargon, culture, and defense mechanism against the bozos working down the hall. Actionable metrics are the antidote to this problem when cause and effect is clearly understood. People are better able to learn from their action. Human beings are innately talented learners when give a clear and objective assessment accessible. All too many reports are to understand by the employees and manager who are supposed to use them to guide their decision making. Unfortunately, most managers do not respond to their complexity by working hand in hand with the data warehousing team to simplify the report so that they can understand them better. Department too often spend their energy learning how to use data to get what they want rather than as genuine feedback to guide their future action. There is an antidote to this misuse of data. First, make the report as simple as possible so that everyone understand them. Remember the saying, metrics are people too. The easiest way to make reports comprehensible is to use tangible, concrete unit. What is the website hit? Nobody is really sure, but everyone knows what a person visiting the website is. One can practically picture those people sitting at their computer. This is why cohort based reports are the gold standards of learning metrics. They turn complex action into people based reports. Each cohort analysis says among the people who use our product in this period, here's how many of them exhibited each of the behavior we care about. In the IMVU's example, we say for behavior: downloading the product, logging into the product from one's computer, engaging in a chat with other customers, and upgrading to the paid version of the product. In other words, the useful the report deals with people and their action, which are far more useful than piles of data points. For example, think about how hard it would have been to tell if IMBUs was being successful if we had reported only on the total numbers of person to person conversation. Let's say we have 10,000 conversation in a period. Is that good? Is that one person being very very social, or is it 10,000 people each trying to product one time and then giving up? There's no way to know without creating a more detailed report. As the gross numbers get larger, accessibility becomes more and more important. It is hard to visualize what it means if the number of website hit goes down from 250,000 in one month to 2,000 the next month. The most people understand immediately what it means to lose 50,000 customers. That practically a whole stadium full of people who are abandoning the product. Accessibility also refers to widespread access to the report. Rocket does this especially well. Every day, their system automatically generate a document containing the latest data of every single one of their split test experiment and other leap of the faith metrics. This document was mailed to every employee of the company. They all always had a fresh copy in their emails inboxes. The report was well laid out and easy to read, with each experiment and its result explained in the plain English. Another way to make report accessible is to use a technique we developed at IMBU. Instead of housing the analytics or data in the separate system, our reporting data and its infrastructure were considered part of the product itself and were owned by the product development team. The report were available on our website, accessible to anyone with an employee count. Each employee could log into the system at any time, choose from a list of all current and past experiments, and see a simple one-page summary of the result. Over time, and those one-page summary become the de facto standard for settling product argument throughout the organization. When people needed evidence to support something they have learned, they would bring a printout with them to the relevant meeting, confident that everyone They should it to would understand its meeting auditable when informed that their pet project is a failure. Most of us are tempted to blame the messenger, the data, the manager, the gods, or anything else we can think of. That's why the third A of good matrix auditable is so essential. We must ensure that the data is credible to employees. The employees at IMVUs would brandish one-page report to demonstrate what they have learned to settle argument, but the process often wasn't too smooth most of the time. When a manager, developers, or team was confronted with results that would kill a pet project, the loser of the argument would challenge the veracity of the data. Such challenges are more common than the most managers would admit, and unfortunately, most data reporting systems are not designed to answer them successfully. Sometimes this is the result of a well intention but misplaced desire to protect the privacy of customer. More often the lack of such supporting documentation is simply a matter of neglect. Most data reporting systems are not built by product development teams whose job is to prioritize and build product features. They are built by business managers and analysts. Manager who must use these systems can only check to see if the reports are mutually consistent. They all too often lack a way to test if the data is consistent with reality. The solution: first, remember that metrics are people too. We need to able to test the data by hand in the messy real world by taking to customer. This is the only way to be able to check if the reports contain true facts. Managers need the ability to spot check the data with real customer. It also has a second benefit: system that provide this level of audibility gives managers and entrepreneurs the opportunities to gain insight into why customers are behaving the way the data indicate. Second, those building reports must make sure the mechanism that generate reports are not too complex. Whenever possible, reports should be drawn directly from the master data rather than from an intermediate system, which reduces opportunities for error. I have noticed that every time a team has one or its judgment or assumption overtuned as a result of a technical problem with the data, its confidence, morale, and discipline are undermined. When we watch entrepreneurs succeed in the myth making world of Hollywood books and magazines, the story is all always structured the same way. First, we see the plucky protagonist having an epiphany, hatching a great new idea. We learn about his or her character and personality, how he or she came to be in the right place at the right time, and how he or she took the dramatic leap to start a business. Then the photo montage begins. It's usually short, just a few minutes of time left, photography or narrative. We see the protagonist building a team, maybe working in a lab, writing on whiteboards, closing sales, profounding on the new keyboard. At the end of the montage, the founders are successful and the story can move on to more interesting fear: how to split the spoils of their success, how will appear on magazine covers, who sues whom, and implication for the future. Unfortunately, the real world that determines the success of a startup happens during the photo montage. It doesn't make the cut in terms of the big story because it is too boring. Only 5% of the entrepreneurship is the big idea, the business model, the whiteboard strategies, strategizing, the splitting up the spoils. The other 95% is the grading work that is measured by innovation, accounting, product prioritization, decision deciding which customers to target or listen to, and having the courage to subject a grand vision to constant testing and feedback. One's decisions stand out above all other as the most difficult, the most time consuming, and the biggest source of waste for more startup. We all must face this fundamental task, deciding when to pivot and when to preserve. To understand what happening during the photo montage, we have to understand how to pivot. That is the subject of chapter 8, pivot or preserve. Every entrepreneur eventually faces an overriding challenge in developing a successful product, deciding when to pivot and when to preserve. Everything that was being discussed so far is a prelude to a seemingly simple questions. Are we making sufficient progress to believe that our original strategic hypothesis is correct, or do we need to make a major change? That change is called a pivot, a structure course correction design to test a new fundamental hypothesis about the product strategy and engine of the growth. Because of the scientific methodology that underlies the lean startup, there is often a misconception that it offers a rigid clinical formula for making pivot or preserve decision. This is not a true. There is no way to remove the human element, vision, intuition, judgment from the practice of entrepreneurship, nor would that be desirable. My goal is advocating a scientific approach to the creation of a startup is to channel human creativity into its most productive form, and there is no bigger destroyer of creative potential than the misguided decision to preserve. Companies that cannot bring themselves to pivot to a new direction on the basis of feedback from marketplace can get stuck in the land of the living, that neither growing enough for dying, consuming resources and commitment from employees and other stakeholders, but not moving ahead. There is good news about our relevance, our judgment. Through we are able to learn, we are innately creative, and we have a remarkable ability to see the signal in the noise. In fact, we are so good at this that sometimes we see signals that aren't there. The only hurt of the scientific method is the relaxation that alter human judgment may be faulty. We can improve our judgment by subjecting our theories to repeated testing. Startup productivity is not about cranking out more widgets or features, it is about aligning our efforts with a business and products that are working to create value and drive growth. In other words, successful pivots put us on a path towards growing a sustainable business. Innovation accounting leads to faster pivot. To see this process in action meets David Benetti, the CEO of Watson. David has had a long career helping to bring the American political process into the 21st century. In the early 1990s, and helped build USA government, the first portal for the federal government. He is also some classic startup failures when it come time to build what isn't. David was determined to avoid batting the farm on his vision. David wanted to tackle the problem of civic participation in the political process. His first product concept was a social network of verified voters, a place where people passionate about civic cause could get together, share ideas, and recruit their friends. David built his first minimum viable product for just over 1,012 1,000 $1,200 in about 3 months and launch it. David wasn't building something that nobody wanted. In fact, from its earliest days, Watizen was able to attract early adopters who loved the core concept. Like all entrepreneurs, David had to refine his product business model, and what made David's challenge especially hard was that he had to make those pivots in the face of moderate success. David's initial concept involved four big leap of faith. Number one, customer would be interested enough in the social network to sign up registration. Number two, Watizen would be able to verify them as registered voters. Activation. Number three, customers who were verified voters would engage with the site activism tools over time. Retention. Number four, engaged customer would tell their friends about the service and recruit them into civic causes referrals. 3 months and 3 months and $1,200 later, David's first MVP was in customer hands. In the initial cohort, 5% signed up for the service and 17% verified their registered voter status. See the chart below, the number were so low that there wasn't enough data to tell what sort of engagement or referrals would occur. It was time to start iterating. Initial MVP registration 5%, activation 70%, retention too low, referral too low. David spent the next 2 months and another $5,000 split testing new product features, messaging, and improving the product design to make it easier to use. Those tests showed a dramatic improvement, growing from a 5% registration rate to 17% and from a 17% activation rate to over 90%. Such is the power of split testing. The optimization gives Davos a critical mass of customer with which to measure the next two leaps of faith. However, as shown in the chart below, those numbers prove to be even more discouraging. David achieved a referral rate of only 4%, a retention rate of 5%. Initial MVP after optimization, registration 5%, 17%, activation 17% to 90%, retention too low 5%, referral too low 4%. David knew he had to do more development and testing for the next 3 months. He continued to optimize split tests and refine his pitch. He talked to customer health focus groups and did countless A or B experiment, as was explained in chapter 7. In a split test, different versions of a product are offered to different customers at the same time. While observing the changes in behavior between the two groups can make inference about the impact of the different variation as shown in the chart below. The referral rate nudged up slightly to 6% and the retention rate went up to 8%. A disappointment. David had spent 8 months and $20,000 to build a product that wasn't lining up to the growth model he hoped for. Before optimization, after optimization, registration 17%, activation 90%, 90%, retention 5%, 8%, referral 4%, 6%. David David faced the difficult challenge of deciding whether to pivot or preserve. This is one of the hardest decisions entrepreneurs face. The goal of creating learning milestone is not to make the decision easy, it to make sure that there is a relevant data in the room when it comes time to decide. Remember, at this point, David has had many customer conversations. He had plenty of learning that he can use it to rationalize the failure he has experienced with the current product. That exactly what many entrepreneurs do in Silicon Valley. We call this experience getting stuck in the land of the living. That it happened when the company has achieved a modicum of success modicum of success, just enough to stay alive, but it's not living up to the expectation to its founder and investors. Such companies are a terrible drain of human energy out of loyalty. The employees and founders don't want to give in. They feel that success might be just around the corner. David has two advantages that help him avoid this fate.